Chapter 371, Shocking White Jade. Both of them fearfully acknowledged the orders and quickly took their leave. Yuzhan Shui and Yuzhan Kong exchanged a glance before looking back at old Madam Ling. Yuzhan Kong then said with a smile, "Old Madam, if that's the case, then can we send a few guards to escort our little princess? The little princess is the beloved of our Yu family, and if family head will end up blaming us for not guarding her well. These few people are all the servants who usually serve the little princess, and it will be convenient to have them around." Both of them had the same thought, might as well make use of this opportunity to see the strength of the mysterious Ling family courtyard. Old Madam Ling considered for a moment before agreeing. The large troop surrounded Yu Bingyan's carriage and left the southern gate slowly. Apart from Ling Tian, Ling Jian, Ling Feng, Ling Yan and the rest, there were 10 white jade, 20 purple jade, and a large crowd following behind the carriage. Along the way, they looked extremely careful, as though they might face an enemy attack at any time. The willow forest was right in front of them, and the Ling family courtyard's buildings could be seen on the horizon. Under the reflection of the sunlight, the buildings looked as though they were all glowing and golden in color. The 30 experts of the Yu family immediately revealed a fascinated expression as they thought, "Is this the Ling family courtyard that the family head instructed us to pay attention to? Just what is the Ling family courtyard like? What is special about it?" All of a sudden, the carriage stopped, and when everyone was in doubt, a white-dressed teen walked over and said to the Yu family members coldly, "The Ling family courtyard is right in front, and I thank everyone for guarding our young madam. Without the orders of our young noble, nobody will be allowed to enter the courtyard. We will ensure the safety of our young madam, and I invite the rest of you to leave." "Invite us to leave? You must be joking." A white jade expert leading the way sneered, "This is the little princess of our Yu family, and we must definitely escort her into a safe place. We can only leave after ensuring her safety. What are your intentions, asking us to leave now? If I ask you to scram, all of you better scram. If you frustrate this daddy here, I will dice all of you up and dump you in the ocean." A violent voice sounded, and the whole forest was filled with a killing intent. In that instant, all the Yu family members felt a layer of frost over them. While Ling Jian was still standing there without a change in his posture, his aura had changed completely. Despite still wearing the attire of a servant, the aura emanating from him had the prestige to destroy the heavens and earth. Under the pressure from his aura, the 30 experts of the Yu family subconsciously took a step back with perspiration all over their heads. "It's you." The white-dressed man in the lead looked at Ling Jian without backing down. "Friend, what fabulous martial arts! Are you really called Ling Jian? Are you really a servant of the Ling family?" The way he saw it, such an expert was definitely a world-famous character. How was it possible for him to be a mere servant of the Ling family? However, the name Ling Jian was completely unknown, and thus such a question. As long as they knew his true name, they would naturally have a way to deal with him. His tone was cold and expression stern, with his tone neither too servile or overbearing. The white-dressed man was certain that the way he carried himself did not insult the name of a white jade expert of their Yu family. However, even he didn't realize that under the prestige of Ling Jian's aura, he inevitably felt a subconscious fear towards Ling Jian. As for Ling Jian's humiliating words, he didn't even dare to retort at all. "It is your honor for all of you to hear my real name." Ling Tian snorted with unconcealed killing intent in his eyes. "If all of you are not going to leave, it will really be your misfortune." "Misfortune? This you wants to see how it will be our misfortune. Even a man made of clay will have anger, not to mention a white jade expert of the Yu family." Despite feeling a strong pressure from Ling Jian's aura, this white-dressed man could no longer rein in his anger and issued a challenge. With a loud shang, he pointed his sword at Ling Jian. "If you can defeat me, we will leave obediently as per your orders. But if you cannot win, then you better make way." Although he was angry, he still left a way out for himself and his subordinates. Ling Jian snickered and placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. With his eyes staring at the white-dressed man coldly, a thunderous roar sounded in the forest. It was Ling Jian pulling out his sword slightly, imbuing his inner chi within the body of his sword and causing it to shake within its sheath. The resulting sound from the friction sounded like thousands of soldiers charging down a battlefield. The skies were filled with an abundant sword chi being emanated from Ling Jian's sword, which wasn't even fully out of its sheath. Ling Jian stood there like a mountain and looked as though he was a precious sword that was unleashed from its sheath. The black iron sword was only unsheathed half a foot, shining resplendently in the sun. Before the sword was fully unsheathed, the members of the Yu family were all defeated mentally. Fear could be seen in all of their eyes as their faces turned pale and they lost all will to battle. Before they even exchanged a single blow, victory had been determined. The expert leading the Yu family let out a sigh as his body deflated and spat out a mouthful of blood. While Ling Jian did not make a move, he was standing right in front of Ling Jian and had to circulate all of his inner chi to block Ling Jian's aura. At such a level, life and death could happen in an instant, with the strong surviving and the weak perishing. His meridians were already injured by Ling Jian's formless sword chi and his life was hanging by a thread. Pin drop silence. With a loud clang, Ling Jian's sword returned to the sheath and silence returned to the forest. Ling Jian's cold gaze swept past the Yu family experts and none of them dared to even raise their heads. Ling Jian let out a sneer before shouting, "Leave." The carriage started to move again and the members of the Ling family followed behind it. Under the setting sun, the 30 members of the Yu family stood there in a daze. The shadows cast by the setting sun had an inexplicable desolate feeling. Before they arrived, who would have thought that the 30 Yu family experts wouldn't even dare to unsheath their sword when facing Ling Jian? The curtains of the carriage were lifted and Yu Bingyan's head stuck out. "Have they left?" Ling Chen smiled and said, "Rest assured, Sister Bingyan, everything is in our control." Yu Bingyan let out a melancholic sigh. "Sister Chen, for such a thing to happen, this little sister is truly ashamed. I have let you down, I have let the Ling family down, and I have let Tian''G.T. down." Ling Chen paused for a moment before saying, "Sister Bingyan, do you know that young noble had already predicted the Yu family's actions before he left? If he knew the choice that you made, he would definitely be very gratified." Yu Bingyan let out a long depressed sigh as she forced a smile. "Choice? I have not made any choice and cannot make any choices. If both families were to fight in the open, I may not have helped any sides. However, such a despicable action is not something which I can accept and I will only stand on the side of my beloved." Ling Chen responded with an before continuing, "Just relax and everything will be over soon. Young noble also wishes for you to grow quickly so you can be of aid to him." Yu Bingyan nodded her head obediently and suddenly asked, "Sister Chen, there is something that I have never understood. Isn't the sky-bearing imperial family already destroyed and remains in name only? As an empire, shouldn't sky-bearing have a martial order medallion as well? If Tian''G.T. took out the martial order medallion, wouldn't he be able to avoid his crisis? Why didn't Tian''G.T. do that?" Ling Chen let out a dim smile. "I asked Mr. Yi about this after young noble left. Mr. Yi said that the martial order medallion can only be used in the hands of an imperial family member. If someone of another surname were to use it, it would only result in a calamity. If not, with the many experts in the world, wouldn't the 8 martial order medallions end up falling into the hands of the pugilistic world?" As she said that, she looked at Yu Bingyan with a smile. "If not for this restriction, with the strength of the Yu family, wouldn't it be an easy task to gather all 8 medallions? If that's the case, wouldn't Beyond Heavens turn into the slave of the Yu family?" Yu Bingyan nodded her head and was enlightened. "I see." Ling Chen let out a sigh. What a pity, there isn't anyone left with Long Xiang's blood in sky-bearing, and Princess Jiayu is a lady. If not, as long as we resorted to some means, this crisis would be averted. Yu Bingyan fell silent for a while before letting out a sigh and returning to her carriage. Ling Jian rushed forward silently and walked beside Ling Chen. Ling Chen looked at Ling Jian and was reminded by Ling Jian's previous performance. Ling Jian, have you broken through and felt the feeling of being one with the sword? Do you feel as though you are at the peak of the sword way? Ling Jian paused for a moment and answered honestly, that's right, I do have such a feeling. I feel as though there isn't anyone in this world capable of fighting me and no one I cannot kill. That is also the reason why I wanted to help young noble. While that green-dressed expert is frightening, I believe that if I sacrifice my life, I will be able to seriously injure that justice. As he said that, he looked at Ling Chen. Up until now, he was still brooding over the fact that Ling Chen stopped him from saving Ling Tian. However, he did not dare to throw a fit because of Ling Tian's orders. Now that Ling Chen was asking him about his martial arts progress, he wanted to make use of this opportunity to say his piece. I knew that you would definitely be unconvinced. Ling Chen let out a bitter laugh and looked towards Ling Jian with a teasing look. When you entered into seclusion, I asked young noble something. Ling Chen paused for a while and saw that Ling Jian's face grew serious. At that time, young noble said that if you can achieve a breakthrough in your seclusion, you will be able to truly enter the entrance of being one with the sword. Just the entrance. Chapter 372, Seeking a Breakthrough. The entrance? Just the entrance? Ling Jian was completely dumbfounded and his eyes almost popped out. This is being one with the sword, the legendary peak of swordplay. Why did young noble say that it was only the entrance? Did young noble really say that? After achieving a breakthrough, Ling Jian felt as though he was invincible apart from the young noble. However, he never imagined that this was merely the entrance in the eyes of the young noble. How could Ling Jian not be shocked? Ling Chen said as she recalled, back then, young noble had said that there are two higher realms after being one with the sword. That was the true way of the sword and the true realm of an expert. What realm? Ling Jian asked impatiently. I don't know either. Ling Chen smiled, young noble didn't mention it. It seems as though he has not reached that realm yet either. However, that green-robed expert has. Thus, you would only be seeking your death to try and save the young noble. Additionally, the young noble would also be placed in a spot if you were to go. Ling Jian lowered his head in a deflated manner as he thought, this Ling Chen, bringing me up to a high and mercilessly slamming me back into hell. To think that she gave me such an answer at the very end. Ling Jian could not help but sigh to the heavens, what a vicious lady. Also, why didn't you allow me to kill those brats just now? Ling Jian suddenly thought about this and asked. Are you pig-headed? Young noble isn't wrong to scold you as such. Ling Chen scolded, since the Yu family wants to swallow our Ling family, why can't we make use of the opportunity to plot against them? Since they are now in the position of power. Ling Chen let out a mysterious smile, besides, you revealing your strength would be akin to revealing the tip of the iceberg to the Yu family, and they would definitely place their focus on our Ling family courtyard. If that's the case, it would be extremely beneficial to your first pavilion's plan in Northern Wei. Ling Jian looked at Ling Chen dumbly and felt as though the one standing in front of him was Ling Tian. The familiar strategies and the familiar feeling of being unable to see through the plan completely. To think that he would have such a feeling again because of Ling Chen. Shaking his head, Ling Jian took a few steps forward and only left behind a single phrase, Last Chen, it is time for you to kill and come into contact with some blood. Ling Chen only let out a smile but did not say a word. She did not agree with Ling Jian but also did not reject him like she usually would. Above the sky-bearing city in the night, countless messenger pigeons took to the air and flew off in all directions. As for Ling Tian at the moment, His footsteps had never slowed down as he traversed the earth like a strong gust of wind. The moment one caught a glimpse of him, he would disappear the very next moment. The frightening speed that he displayed made one gasp in admiration. If a normal person could maintain such a speed for a short while, he would be considered a movement technique expert. However, Ling Tian had already maintained such a speed for a full 4 hours. Throughout the 5 days of him escaping, Ling Tian was completely unable to escape from Justice's furious pursuit despite using the many techniques from his previous life and mystical concealment techniques. If it were any other person, he probably would have been killed by Ling Tian's many sure-kill techniques. But in front of absolute strength, all of his so-called techniques were no different from paper tigers. At every single moment every day, Ling Tian could clearly feel the prickling cold killing intent at his back as though there was an ice-cold snake slithering around behind him. Furthermore, this ice-cold snake had the ability to easily take his life. In the 5 days of the chase, Ling Tian had already exhausted his inner chi twice in order to escape. Despite using all of the various means and ideas he had, Ling Tian was never able to gain more than a 6-hour lead over Justice. Furthermore, Ling Tian would have to lead such a life for a full half a year. At the same time, Ling Tian was beginning to run out of fresh ideas and he did not dare to use the same technique in front of Justice twice. Such a nasty scenario was something that Ling Tian had never imagined. While he did place Justice's martial arts in high regards, he never imagined that Justice would be so frightening and that he would be reduced to such a pathetic state. It was still acceptable if the only outstanding thing about Justice was his martial arts. However, his will was firm, he was wiser than his peers, and was a medicinal expert. Such a character did indeed live up to the name of being the martial order medallion owner, the #1 figure in the world. Ling Tian had already tried to escape into a city numerous times as he was certain that his chances to escape would be much higher the moment he entered the city. However, Justice had found out about his intentions and purposefully sealed off any routes that would lead Ling Tian to the city. Ling Tian had already circled the city twice but did not have a chance to enter the city at all. If he were to take a risk to enter the city, it was very likely that he would be slaughtered by Justice. After knowing that Yu Bingyan was suffering from divine black negative meridians, this was the first time Ling Tian felt the urgent need to increase his strength. Absolute strength would be his only reliable trump card. The moment Justice was to familiarize himself with Ling Tian's escaping techniques, Ling Tian's death would be certain if he didn't raise his strength. However, how could it be an easy thing for him to increase his strength? Especially the fact that Ling Jian's martial arts realm was already extremely high. For him to take another step forward, how could that be an easy affair? Just like the saying, huge pressure would definitely cause one to unleash their potential. However, despite the pressure on Ling Tian being high enough, his potential might not be unleashed. While Ling Tian was still carrying 2 great cyclic pills on him, Ling Tian would never dare to consume them right now. It was less than a month since he last consumed the great cyclic pellet and taking another one now would definitely cause him to die a horrible death from the rupture of his meridians. This was something without a doubt. Thus, Ling Tian could only use the most foolish method. Every time his inner chi was completely exhausted, he would feel a small improvement when he recovered his inner chi. In the realm of sports science, this was called breaking through a person's limits. After breaking through the limits of one's body, he would definitely feel a significant increase in his speed and strength. At the same time, Ling Tian knew that this so-called limit was actually the second limit. In other words, after breaking through the limits, the human body would have a sudden feeling of being refreshed from fatigue. At this time, the human body would be temporarily recovered. When the body was once again exhausted, that would be the true limit of a human body. That was the time when the human body would not have a single ounce of strength left. Only by recovering at such a moment could one achieve an improvement in their inner chi. This would also help to stabilize the growth of one's limits. Ridges after ridges were left behind him and Ling Jian's route was extremely odd. He went to the left sometimes and would suddenly turn to the right. After entering a valley, he would suddenly exit it immediately. At times, he would leave his aura in all directions but not choose a specific direction to go towards. This was a method which combined all of Ling Tian's knowledge from his previous life. While such a method would be completely ineffective when used against an ordinary person and would only serve to slow himself down, it was extremely effective against someone like Justice whose sixth senses were extremely acute. Ling Tian was certain that Justice was definitely having a hard time chasing after him in the past few days. For an expert like Justice, he was extremely used to using his sixth senses to feel the presence of his opponent. However, for every advantage, there would definitely be a disadvantage. According to Ling Tian's estimate, his own speed was definitely slightly slower than Justice's speed. If not, it would be impossible for him to be almost caught a few times. But in a cat and mouse chase like this, the one escaping had the advantage as he could plan his own route. At the very least, Ling Tian was certain that he would be able to gain a 4 hours lead. However, he required a full 12 hours to fully restore his inner chi. Thus, if Ling Tian wanted to find a way to achieve a breakthrough, he would have to make use of his lead to find a safe hiding spot for himself. Only when he was able to recover his inner chi at ease would he have the chance to escape from his present predicament. If he were to be disrupted when cultivating, he would definitely enter into cultivation deviation and die on the spot if it was serious. This was a huge gamble, but Ling Tian had no choice but to make such a gamble. He would only have a chance to win a bet if he took this gamble. If he couldn't increase his speed, Justice would eventually catch up to him and he would lose the half-year bet for sure. Ling Tian sped up again and entered the densely packed rigaline. After making a round in the rigaline, he exited the rigaline and landed by the side of a protruding rock. This protruding rock was a few thousand catties heavy and had a small concealed space underneath it. At the same time, there were dense bushes made of weeds and huge pine trees in front of the rock. When Ling Tian had entered the rigaline, he had already discovered this wonderful hiding spot. Ling Jian unsheathed his sword and dug out a small crater where he could hide himself in and piled up the resulting soil by the entrance of the crater. He then carefully shifted a layer of grass from a distance and used it to cover up the pile of soil before tidying up the surroundings. After ensuring that everything melded into the background perfectly, Ling Tian raised his head up to the sky and concluded that it was about time. With a smile, he ducked into the crater and circulated his inner chi. With a deep breath, the small pile of soil was sucked to the entrance of the crater and completely blocked the entrance to the space under the rock. If someone from the outside were to look at the rock, he would definitely think that underneath the rock was originally a pile of soil with weeds growing all over it. The pile of soil blended into the surroundings perfectly with nothing standing out. The soil loosened slightly with the movements so slight that no one could detect it. At the place where the vegetation was the densest, a thin reed pipe stuck out from within the soil. Chapter 373, So Close Yet So Far. Under the heap of soil, Ling Tian's mouth was placed on the other end of the reed pipe, and he gently shut his eyes, sinking into deep rest. He had almost dried up his body, with his internal energy trickling in drops, and his inner core akin to a dried piece of sponge, as clean as a newborn baby. It was only after a while that his inner core began to heat up, with thin streams of energy slowly coalescing there and leisurely flowing out to his meridians. The energy began to heal Ling Tian's damaged meridians from the constant overdrive he was in, and slowly, the rivulets turned into a small stream in his danshan. The meridians in his body jumped slightly, and the acupoints on his feet also warmed up and responded, as they began to take in the surrounding energy into his body to merge with his internal energy. It was akin to meeting a long-lost friend, as both energies merged together and began to spread through his entire body. The mortal shell connects to the heaven and earth, taking one's body as the universe. Under the relentless pursuit of justice, it finally spurred Ling Tian to successfully stimulate his potential. Right now, Ling Tian's thoughts and spirits seemed to have reached a miraculous state of being one with the heavens themselves. This was akin to the Buddha himself achieving enlightenment on the spot, an opportunity that arose by accident because of his insistence in pushing forward. While he was still underground, Ling Tian felt the changes in his own thoughts and senses. Upon revolving his internal energy, any and all movements within a few hundred feet were captured in his eyes, without a single detail being missed. The cry of birds and crickets seemed to sound directly beside him, and the meridians in his body all began to jump energetically as energy ceaselessly flooded his body. Like rivers flowing to the sea, all the energy poured into his dry danshan bit by bit. The irrigating Xiantian energy in his body met with the energy from heaven and earth that he absorbed through his feet and split up, one moving down and the other going up towards the rest of his body. This formed a perfect cycle, that continued to revolve unceasingly. While his mouth was still clasped around the reed pipe, Ling Tian had long lost the need to continue taking in the foul Huitian air, but rather had reached the Xiantian stage of being back in his fetal state, where he only required energy. His entire mind was partly unconscious, and right now, he had completely and utterly merged with the heavens and earth, without any difference between them. Time slowly slipped by. Justice's figure appeared just like a passing cloud, floating by the patch of grass and forest. Along this journey of pursuit, Justice had felt something strange in the last few days. He had long grasped all of Ling Tian's abilities, as well as his speed, but it seemed like that brat had not even stopped once the entire way. As the saying went, a man's strength is finite, for he is not God after all. Once a man had drained his energy, he would fall unconscious due to the lack of strength. This was especially so for a martial artist, for if he were to exhaust all the energy in his body he would enter a dangerous situation, as even a kid would be able to beat him up. This was similar to a billionaire who did not bring along any spare cash, and was unable to purchase anything on the streets. Furthermore, since martial artists put more emphasis on burst strength, the moment they drained all their energy, this would mean that all the muscles in their body would not have even the slightest bit of energy left to move. Ordinary people would meet a scenario known as energy depletion, but a martial artist's scenario was known as devoid of energy. Both could not be explained in the same breath, as an ordinary person's energy depletion could be recovered in 2 or 3 days, but once the martial artist became devoid of energy, if not handled properly, he might end up crippled forever. If Ling Tian was really risking this sort of exertion to push himself along the way, then that was a definite death trap. But if he didn't use such a tactic, then how he could escape from Justice's grasp so many times? Justice's eagle-sharp eyesight scanned his surroundings once, and immediately could tell that Ling Tian had passed by here, and even stopped for a long time. The problem was, why did he stop here, and what was his motive? More importantly, where was he now? Justice's figure flashed through the forest, speeding through at an insane speed that would leave a person who saw it dazed, before slowly returning and standing at his original spot. Standing on top of a piece of rock, he started to frown. If Ling Tian was at the side staring at him, he would have opened his mouth in shock. Justice's speed, direction, as well as route were exactly the same as what Ling Tian had taken into the forest before, without any deviation. It was as though he was repeating history by walking the same route again. As for the final position he stopped, it was exactly where Ling Tian had buried himself, with the rock above. To think that such a miraculous pursuit technique actually existed in this world. No wonder Justice had scoffed at Ling Tian's bet to last for half a year. He was actually keeping such a skill as his trump card. However, Justice right now was at a loss. Ling Tian's traces had come to a halt at this point, and Justice was thinking about whether Ling Tian had stopped here for a moment before choosing another place to escape. However, pausing to utilize his senses, Justice found out that this was not the case. Justice could feel that Ling Tian had paced around this area for a few times, which resulted in a slightly stronger aura of his permeating this spot, but had somehow started to dissipate in all directions later on. This left Justice unbelievably puzzled. Ling Tian had mysteriously vanished. Could it be that Ling Tian actually had an epiphany and comprehended the Great Martial Path, allowing him to shatter the void and travel through space? Or else, why would such a situation occur? Even if he were to burrow into the ground or fly into the heavens, there would be some indication. Along this pursuit, while Ling Tian appeared to have suffered a lot, the same went without saying for Justice. Being the pursued, Ling Tian had the advantage of pioneering the route, which would allow him to create feints and diversions, and give him the chance to slip from Justice's grasp. However, Justice had to recognize and overcome all the ambushes in order to get a clue as to where Ling Tian was headed. These few days, Justice felt as though Ling Tian had transformed into some sort of headless fly, leading him on wild goose chase round and round like a merry-go-round. They had circled the forests close to the celestial gathering city for a good 5 or 6 times before running into this particular forest. Based on Justice's predictions, Ling Tian should be close to exhaustion, and should not have any resistance left. However, how did such an unreasonable scene happen? While the truth was not far away from Justice's predictions, that Ling Tian was already bereft of strength, the prerequisite was for him to first be found. Justice's body swayed as he cast his gaze out over 100 feet. This time, he strained his movement technique to the pinnacle and collapsed into a green haze as he breezed past the entire forest, scrutinizing every single tree and leaf as he did so. He then leaped up onto the canopy, and a purple aura surfaced around him as he began to activate his secret law, heavenly vision, boundless hearing. In that instant, with a circumference of over 100 feet, each and every movement was magnified and transferred into his ears. Justice closed his eyes, and his senses extended to his maximum, making every single tree, every stalk of grass a part of his eyes and senses. Ling Tian was in for another shock. Just based on his previous hiding method, he would definitely be completely exposed in front of Justice under this supreme skill. If not for the fact that he had an enlightenment and had managed to enter the state of merging with the heavens as one, he would have long ago fallen into Justice's hands. Right now, Ling Tian had no way to retaliate. The god of luck seemed to be following Ling Tian everywhere he went. If Ling Tian had done more research and found out the nickname of Justice, even with his arrogance and confidence, he would never have set this bet with Justice. The nickname of Heaven's Way is fair, none shall escape the web of justice was not given for nothing. This supreme skill was one that even his bosom buddy King Chen was unaware of. So long as Justice locked onto a target, no one would be able to escape his clutches, everyone would be sentenced to justice in the end. However, at this instant, the first anomaly appeared. The heavenly vision, boundless hearing that had never failed him before was ineffective this time. For this matter, even if he were to mention it to his predecessors, probably none of them would believe him. After a long while, with a caca sound, the clear sound of a branch snapping could be heard as Justice swooped down like a bird and landed on a rock. His face was pale, and breathing ragged as an unnatural flush could be seen on his face. This supreme skill, while omnipotent, was not something that could be used willfully. Justice was still mortal after all, and even he would feel fatigue. If it wasn't for the fact that he was sure Ling Tian had already fully exhausted his strength, he would not have activated such a skill if he knew he had to engage in a fight later on. Justice could only sit down glumly and frown as he slowly pondered. Never in his dreams would he dare to imagine that the target he was painfully searching for, Ling Tian, was actually comfortably nestled beneath the rock he was sitting on. If Justice were to find out, he would not even need to use much strength to finish him off. Simply applying some pressure on his butt would make this place Ling Tian's permanent resting grounds, never to show his face in this world ever again. Chapter 374, Ximen family. If Ling Tian knew that justice was meditating just above his head, it would be impossible for him to concentrate and enter into the man and heavens as one state no matter how calm he was. At that time, he would definitely be discovered, and death would be certain. However, the matters of the world were just that mystical at times. Such a coincidence made one not know whether to laugh or cry. A long while later, Justice finished his meditation and stood up, loosening up his muscles a little. Looking towards the distance, he let out a long sigh. From the few days of chasing after Ling Tian, Justice could always feel Ling Tian's presence in his heart. No matter how Ling Tian escaped or used his puny tricks, Justice had always felt that victory was within his grasp and it was impossible for him to lose. But right now, it was the first time in his life where Justice felt that he didn't have a target. To think that he would lose the target that he was chasing after. In Justice's eyes, this was completely unacceptable and shameful. Justice paced around the rock for a moment as a thought flashed past his head. Ling Tian had been trying to enter the city for the past few days but was blocked by him. There were only two reasons for Ling Tian to want to go into the city: either Ling Tian had friends in the city to help him, or Ling Tian had something to do in the city. Regardless of which, Ling Jian would surely enter the city. Since that was the case, why couldn't he wait in the city for Ling Tian? Having this idea in his mind, Justice did not delay any longer and shot into the air, disappearing like a gust of wind. His expression was calm and casual, as though the loss he had just suffered didn't affect him at all. At this moment, Ling Tian was still immersed in the fresh martial arts realm and did not notice Justice's departure at all. At the same time, he was completely unaware that someone had been sitting on top of his head for such a long time. In the celestial gathering city, the meeting hall of the Ximen family. The current family head of the family, Ximen Wuyi, was seated at the head of the table with his expression calm as his hand tapped on his kneecap in a rhythmic fashion. By his side was the #1 general of Western Han, Marshal Ximen Tian. His face was filled with a curly beard, and he was obviously an uncultured individual. Besides Ximen Tian were another 3 individuals. 2 of them were white-bearded elders and were the only remaining elders in the Ximen family, Ximen Sheng, and Ximen Kuang. The youngest individual was the adopted son of the family head, the only younger generation figure who had the right to enter this meeting, Ximen Si. Apart from these few individuals, there were 7 to 8 empty seats and no one else in the Ximen family had the qualifications to enter this meeting. Ximen Wuyi let out a cough as he sadly lamented, with second brother and the rest in the past, the meeting room would be extremely crowded and lively. However, who would have thought that there would only be the few of us left today and the others have already? As he said that, he suddenly paused and turned his head away. Ximen Tian let out a long sigh and comforted, "Big brother, they have already left us and you don't have to let the matter weigh on your heart any longer. The mastermind of all this is that little thief Ling Tian, and we must definitely capture him one day and tear him to shreds. We must definitely take our revenge for second brother and Kinger." Ximen Si also said carefully, "That's right, foster father, what third uncle said makes sense. You have to take good care of your body. If you were to fall, our Ximen family would truly collapse." Ximen Wuyi turned his head around and let out a gratified smile, "Sire, rest assured. I will not fall so easily. However, my mood hasn't been good recently, and I haven't been tending to the family matters. All the small and large matters of the family have been on your shoulders, and it must have been tough for you." As he said that, even Ximen Tian looked at Ximen Si and acknowledged him with a smile and a nod. Ximen Si's face turned red as he said uncomfortably, "Helping foster father to carry your burdens is this child's duty. How can there be any sense of fatigue? This child feels ashamed to receive such praises from foster father and uncle. If not for Brother King meeting with an unfortunate incident, there wouldn't be a need for such a foolish individual like myself." Ximen Wu Yi let out a chuckle. This child, everything about you is good except for being so shy. This old man and your third uncle are both your elders and there isn't anything wrong for us to praise you. Do you want us to beat you up with a stick instead for you to feel good? As Ximen Wu Yi said that, everyone burst out into giggles and Ximen's face turned even redder. At the same time, he also let out an awkward chuckle and seemed to be even more embarrassed. Ximen Wu Yi then took up 2 strips of paper from the side and said with a solemn gaze, "The reason why I have summoned all of you here today is because of 2 important pieces of news. First, Northern Wei has used their martial order medallion to request Beyond Heavens to kill Ling Tian. Ling Tian is now in the midst of escaping with his whereabouts unknown. Second, the little princess of the Yu family and Ling Tian are officially engaged. Presently, the first and third elders of the Yu family have led close to 1,000 experts to send their dowry. Piracy. This is definitely a conspiracy. The Yu family is definitely coming something." On the one side, Ximen began to roar in anger. Over the years, he had fought the third elder of the Yu family many times and had always ended up losing with a few of his teeth being knocked out. Thus, his hatred towards the Yu family was already deeply rooted in his heart. The moment he heard the name of the Yu family, he instantly flew into a rage. However, due to him losing a few front teeth, his pronunciation wasn't clear and he said conspiracy as conspiracy. Ximen Tian choked on the tea he was drinking on and began coughing. Only after a long while did he recover and say, "I say, first elder, not just the Yu family, who doesn't have a few strands of those. One I recommend you to say trick instead." Ximen Wu Yi let out a few heavy coughs and spat out a mouthful of phlegm with his face contorting. At the same time, Ximen's face turned pale and he began to take in deep breaths. By the side, puchy sounds could be heard and Ximen was trying his best to hold in his laughter but with little effect. Ximen's face turned red from anger as he pointed at Ximen Tian with his finger trembling. "This old man isn't as dear to you as you. The Yu family definitely has a escort and we must guard against them." Ximen Wu Yi began to cough again as he said, If First Elder has anything to say, you can add on after the meeting. Let me gather the opinions of the rest first, alright?" Ximen seemed as though he wanted to say something else but eventually depressedly sat down on his seat. Ximen Tian's chimpanzee-like face broke out in a wide smile as he added on, "Big brother, why don't we hear what First Elder has to say about the Yu family's conspiracy? It would definitely be a good thing." He curled his lips up and mimicked the way Ximen would speak. By the side, Ximen could no longer hold in his laughter and burst out laughing. Even Ximen could not help but lower his head giggling. Preposterous. Ximen Wu Yi wanted to let out a roar to stop the laughing. But after shouting, he realized that even he could not stop himself from giggling and was slightly embarrassed. Seeing how Ximen's mustache curled up in anger and was about to blow up, Ximen quickly stopped laughing and said, "What does foster father think we should do? If the ambitions of the Yu family are so huge and we ignore them now, even if the Yu family cannot reach us now, it will only be a matter of time before we are in trouble. This is an extremely serious matter." The moment he said that, the awkward atmosphere in the room was dissolved and everyone's attention was brought back to the original topic. At the same time, everyone could not help but feel goodwill towards Ximen for his good timing. "No. The matters of the Yu family can be delayed slightly." Ximen Wu Yi looked at Ximen with praise. Then, a menacing glare shot out from his eyes as he clenched his teeth with hatred. "The most important thing would be for us to ensure Ling Tian's death in the hands of Beyond Heavens. 2 of this old man's younger brothers, 2 of my biological sons, and the death troops that I nurtured for years were all destroyed in his hands. How can we not take revenge for such a hatred? The opportunity in front of us is given by the heavens, and even if I can't kill him personally, I have to seize his corpse at all costs and rip his body to shreds. I will make sure he can never enter the cycle of reincarnation." "That's right. No matter what, we should kill Ling Tian first to take our revenge before considering all other things," Ximen Kuang said in agreement. Because of Ling Tian, more than half of their Ximen family's strength was destroyed, and the Ximen family was in a dire state. If not for the military authority that Ximen Chongtian had and the miraculous merit Ximen brought back from the battlefield, there would definitely be many other families within Western Han trying to hit them when they were down. As for how Ximen managed to bring back such a huge merit, Ximen Wu Yi completely couldn't be bothered. Ling Tian's martial arts are top-notch and his thinking meticulous. Without Beyond Heavens taking action personally, it would be difficult for anyone else to deal with him. Ximen Chongtian said with a frown, even catching up to their speed would be an extremely difficult thing to do. How will we be able to determine his death and snatch his corpse? That is easy, Ximen Wu Yi said. There are many who have seen Ling Tian before, and I have a drawing of him as well. We can split up our forces and search in all directions. As long as we can determine that Ling Tian appeared near our Western Han territory, Beyond Heavens won't be too far away. At that time, we would only need to delay Ling Tian for a while and give the martial order medallion owner time to catch up. At that time, it will be impossible for Ling Tian to escape. This old man is willing to lead the team. Ximen Xing stood up and requested with his fists cupped. At the same time, both Ximen Kuang and Ximen Se didn't back down either and stood up to make the same request. Chapter 375, Storm in All Directions. There's no rush. Ximen Wu Yi chuckled, Chongtian, you have your military duties and there isn't a need for you to move out personally. This old man will have to stay in the family. How about this? First elder will lead 20 people from our family to search toward the north. Second elder will lead 20 people to search toward the east. Sire, you will search toward the west. Your third uncle's military camp is near the western gate and you must maintain contact with your third uncle. Don't make any rash moves. The four of them stood up and bowed, we hear and obey the family head's orders. Ximen Wu Yi's face turned chilly as his gaze swept past the three of them. The moment you find Ling Tian, block him at all cost. I don't need any of you to kill him, and you only need to delay for time. Even if all of our men were to die in Ling Tian's hands, we must ensure that Ling Tian will die in the hands of the martial order medallion owner. Just when the Ximen family was having their secret meeting and arranging their plans to deal with Ling Tian, all the other families that received news of this matter were also in the midst of planning. After all, the Ling family without Ling Tian was akin to a huge piece of fresh meat without any ability to defend itself. At the same time, it was also certain that the rumors of Ling Tian being a disciple of Beyond Heavens were definitely false. A while ago, a large battle between Northern Wei, Sky-bearing, and Western Han broke out without any signs at all. While the battle was indeed a miserable one, it was extremely short and lasted a few days only. Before the various families had a chance to react and plan the insertion of their troops, the miserable battle had ended. In just a short few days, there were tens of thousands of casualties and over 200,000 captured soldiers. While this battle lasted for only a short while, it had a huge impact on the situation in the whole world. The Northern Wei army had launched 400,000 soldiers to face the 70,000 Sky-bearing troops but suffered a huge loss under the coalition of Sky-bearing and Western Han. Currently, it was impossible for Northern Wei to pick themselves up again. Regardless of whether or not someone was intelligent, it was obvious to see that Northern Wei was in a state where anyone could bully them. As for the Sky-bearing Empire, while they were the victors, The unlucky Emperor Long Xiong had failed in his scheme to uproot the Ling family and was uprooted instead. At this moment, the sky-bearing imperial family was there in name only and had lost all authority. All the authority of sky-bearing was in the grasp of the Ling family. Despite them retaining the name of sky-bearing and even supporting Long Xiong's unborn child to become the emperor, everyone knew that this was no more than a stopgap measure. It was only a matter of time before the emperor's surname in sky-bearing changed. With the fall of the two empires, the biggest victor was the very target the three empires wanted to get rid of, the Ling family. The unpredictable changes of the world were just so amazing. However, the very thing that shocked all the great families was not the sudden rise of the Ling family but Ling Tian's display in that battle. Rushing over from 1,000 miles away and charging into the enemy's 400,000 army with 5 men to save his father. At the same time, he was able to grasp the perfect opportunity and use his less than 50,000 troops to score a victory against the 400,000 Northern Wei army and capture almost 200,000 soldiers. This battle had successfully created a god of death on the battlefield, Ling Tian. If Ling Tian had revealed his outstanding talent when wiping out the Ximen family in sky-bearing, then this battle had caused his name to truly shock the whole world. He had become the individual that every family and empire felt wary toward. An expert like himself coupled with his talents in leadership was the talent that every empire sought to have. But if he was their enemy, he would be the #1 target to get rid of. Apart from Beyond Heavens, what other sect or family in the world would be able to nurture such a well-rounded talent? Thus the rumor of Ling Tian being the disciple of Beyond Heaven. Almost everyone was certain that the Ling family and Ling Tian would definitely rise up in fame all over the world. Everyone could not help but curse Long Xiong for being foolish. If not for Long Xiong plotting against the Ling family, the past silk pants Ling Tian would never have risen up in revolt. Every power in the continent had been preparing for that very moment, to do everything in their power to prevent the rising of Ling Tian. The moment Ling Tian's foundations were set, it would be the demise of every other power. However, in everyone's heart, Ling Tian was a disciple of Beyond Heavens, and none of them wanted to be the first to stand out against Ling Tian. This was also the reason why no other powers entered sky-bearing. However, just when everyone was making their plans silently, a huge storm broke out in sky-bearing and the shocking news of Ling Tian being pursued by the martial order medallion owner had spread. Apart from letting the major powers heave a sigh of relief, all the major powers had the same thought: since you are not a disciple of Beyond Heavens, there is no need for us to be wary of anything. While they didn't have to consider the fact that Ling Tian had a special background, the authority Ling Tian wielded, the wealth of his family, the strength of his martial arts, and his intellect made Ling Jian a huge threat to all the major powers. Especially the fact that he didn't have the rules of Beyond Heavens to rein him in, this would only turn Ling Tian into an even more frightening character. Thus, none of the major powers would allow Ling Tian to exist in the world. While the martial order medallion owner had already appeared to chase after Ling Tian, and Ling Tian's death was almost certain, Ling Tian was still only being chased after, with his death presently uncertain. As long as Ling Tian lived for another day, he would definitely pose a threat to the major powers and they had no choice but to. Thus, all the major powers began to stir. The Zhou family. In the chilly night sky with the vast skies filled with stars, the family head of the #1 financial magnate, Zhou Fenghan, was standing in the wind-blown pavilion of the Green Ripple Immortal Park with his head facing the starry night sky and a look of worry on his face. He had suddenly remembered the bet old Madame Ling had with him when he annulled the marriage with the Ling family 10 years ago. Then, he thought about Ling Tian's frightening talent and could not help but let out a desolate sigh as he thought, I have already lost this bet since 10 years ago. While I didn't want to admit the fact that I have lost, it was only a matter of facing the facts. No matter how I choose to hide the matter, it is a fact that I have lost. Thinking about the decision of the family in the meeting, he could not help but let out another sigh. As the saying goes, an ambitious individual should not be concerned with the little details. However, could he really perform such ungrateful and treacherous acts? Zhou Fenghan looked at the night sky with his heart in a complete mess. Footsteps sounded from behind him, and the number 2 character of the Zhou family, Zhou Fengying, walked over. "Big brother, are you still worrying about the matter of Ling Tian?" "That's right," Zhou Fenghan frowned. In the meeting, almost everyone who had authority requested for this old man to issue a kill order for Ling Tian, and Xur was the only one who strongly disagreed. "Haze, how would any of you understand the bond I shared with older brother Ling back then? If I were to issue the kill order today, how could I ever face my brother and sister-in-law? I am really in a dilemma." Zhou Fengying went silent for a while before saying, "Big brother, if I were to put it crudely, what is important to you is your own personal affair, but the matter we are discussing about is the affair of the family. The only reason why our Zhou family has been living in seclusion for so many years is to fight for hegemony with the world. We are different from other pugilistic families and are definitely not an ordinary merchant family. We have to heartlessly get rid of anything that stands in our way, and we should not be affected by personal emotions, even if you are the family head. These 2 matters should not even be talked about in the same breath. Currently, there are 2 huge barriers to our final goal, the Yu family and Ling Tian. The Yu family has the same idea as us, wanting to wait until the final moment before turning the whole situation around to their favor, and they have been waiting for the opportunity as they remain hidden. Despite his young age, Ling Tian already revealed his ambitions to rule over the world and had many advantages such as wealth, strength, and authority. Regardless of the reason behind Northern Wei using their martial order medallion to kill Ling Tian, it is a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us. If we do not make use of this opportunity to get rid of Ling Tian with the aid of the martial order medallion, Ling Jian will eventually become a huge tumor in our side. Furthermore, the martial order medallion has never failed in its task, and we are only speeding up the process." Zhou Fengying then took a step forward and whispered, "Big brother, not to mention Ling Tian, even if we are only talking about the martial order medallion owner, we can also kill 2 birds with a single stone." His last phrase was said with a profound tone. Zhou Fenghan's eyes lit up as he nodded in agreement. "That's right, this is a good opportunity indeed. If not for second brother's reminder, I may have really missed this opportunity because of my personal affairs. If that's the case, let us not delay matters. Let brother go send out news tonight to carry out this plan. Nothing can go wrong." Zhou Fengying laughed out loud. "Rest assured, big brother, Brother Go's martial arts have already achieved great heights, and together with the aid of his sect, no one will be able to stop him. This matter would definitely be successfully accomplished. Big brother just needs to wait for the good news patiently." Seeing that Zhou Fengying didn't have the intention to leave but was in deep consideration as though he was hesitating about something, Zhou Fenghan could not help but be puzzled. With his second brother's steadiness and firm attitude, could there be something that he didn't know what to do? Thus, he could not help but ask, "Second brother, is there anything else? Even you are hesitating?" After a moment of delay, Zhou Fengying said, "Big brother, have you noticed that Xwer's mood has been extremely erratic recently? In today's meeting, wasn't her reaction a little extreme as well?" Thinking about Zhou Yanzu's actions in the meeting, Zhou Fenghan nodded his head in agreement. "Xwer is indeed acting strangely recently, and I am also in a dilemma because of this. If not for second brother's reminder, I would have forgotten about it." Zhou Fengying said with worry, "Big brother, when this little brother brought Xwer to Skybearing, not only was Ling Tian suave and elegant, his literary talents were stunning, and he is a martial arts expert. Furthermore, he originally had a marriage agreement with Xwer and even saved her life once. I'm afraid that Xwer may be infatuated with him. With Ling Tian's talents and looks, what lady wouldn't fall in love with him?" Zhou Fenghan felt his heart skip a beat as he remembered the bet from back then and laughed bitterly. Could it be that he really lost so bitterly? He then said with a mellow tone, "Xur isn't young anymore, should we?" Chapter 376, Breakthrough. Zhou Fengying replied, "That's right, this younger brother has the same thought. We have to cut the emotional longing inside Xur, or else this will result in irreparable consequences. Now that Ling Tian is being pursued by the martial order medallion owner, there is more than a 90% chance that he can't live on. From what I discovered, experts have been sent by the secretly plotting Yu family as well as the Ximen family who have a grudge against the Ling family. They're watching over the entire sky-bearing empire for the sole purpose of not allowing Ling Tian to return to sky-bearing alive. In addition, the Dongfeng family has also sent their people to observe the situation, just like us. Thus, it is guaranteed that Ling Tian can't walk out of this alive. If Xur can't get rid of her lovelorn thoughts, then I'm afraid." Zhou Fenghan had a grave expression as he paced around, before asking, "How did you find out about these matters? The Yuan Ximen family are within my plans, but how did you find out about the Dongfeng family's matters?" Zhou Fengying laughed in satisfaction as he replied, "Hee, a few days ago, some of the Dongfeng family members came over, proposing on behalf of their prince, Dongfeng Xingchen. But I knew that elder brother was planning to leave Xur by your side for a few more years, and thus I pushed the matter down for you. It was precisely from their mouths that I found out about the matter of Ling Tian being hunted. This matter can't be rushed." Zhou Fenghan frowned, and unhappily said, "If we are too hasty, we will only end up causing Xur unhappiness. Big brother, I, on the other hand, feel that if this matter were to succeed, it would be killing many birds with one stone." Zhou Fengying grinned. "Firstly, we can use this to cut off Xur's thoughts about Ling Tian. Secondly, we can win over an ally in Eastern Zhou, which can serve as a restriction for the Yu family. Lastly, with Eastern Zhou allying with us, when we set off on conquest we do not have to worry about our backyard being set on fire." Zhou Fenghan lowered his head, pondering about this matter. He ended up sighing, "Let me think about it for a while." A hint of a smile rose on the corners of Zhou Fengying's lips. He knew that his elder brother was already partly convinced, and didn't say anything else, bowing and leaving the room. Zhou Fenghan sat at the wind-blown pavilion alone after Zhou Fengying left, sighing every now and then. Eventually, as the night grew deeper, he too retired to his room. It was only a long time later that a petite figure slowly stood up from the thick forests surrounding the wind-blown pavilion. Only when the faint moonlight shone could that figure be seen clearly. With peerless beauty, a delicate body, tottering on the spot, it was the little princess, Zhou Yanzu. Her purpose of coming over was actually to ask Zhou Fenghan to help Ling Tian on behalf of their friendship, but to think that she overheard such a news instead. Her heart felt as if it was being twisted. From hatred and disgust, her opinion of Ling Tian had slowly turned positive, but it was far from being madly in love with him. She just wanted to help someone she admired. She definitely didn't want such a figure to die under various plots and schemes. However, Zhou Yanzu never expected that her two grandfathers, who had always treated her like an absolute treasure, would choose to sell her out this time. In the end, they still chose to betray her. Even after working her heart out for the family these few years, she only amounted to this much. At this point, her heart felt totally shattered. On the second day, while the entire Zhou family was discussing a marriage alliance with the Dongfeng family, Zhou Fenghan received a report that Zhou Yanzu had left behind a letter and disappeared, her whereabouts unknown. At the same time, Ling Tian felt as though he was in a dream. An earth-shatteringly huge dream. Inside his dream, he seemed to have experienced both his lifetimes, staining himself with years upon years of mortal dust. The endless misery in his past life, sorrowful and bitter, 1,000 struggles, 10,000 types of torture. Then he experienced the frivolity of this life, looking down on the world, surrounded by beauties and passion, domineeringly flying upward. The excess melancholy and low-spiritedness of his past life slowly drifted further and further away from him, and inside the dream, his experiences of both lifetimes slowly merged into a single whole, no longer separate from each other, as though he had gone through both experiences at the same time. Pain and pleasure, love and hatred, success and failure, each opposing force met without any gaps, and the resulting feeling was as though one had successfully detached himself from the mortal world, detached from the cycle of samsara. ZhuangZi dreams of a butterfly, but who is ZhuangZi? And who is the butterfly? Who is in whose dreams? Or is it the butterfly that is dreaming of ZhuangZi? 1. However, this didn't matter anymore. So long as one has experienced it, lived through it, be it dreaming or awake, fantasy or reality, what difference was there? Be it in dreams or in reality, it was good enough to have seen it. No regrets. In the darkness below the boulder, Ling Tian slowly opened his eyes, giving out a large grin, his entire being radiated indifference to the world. A carefree smile. If any woman in the world were to come across this smile, most likely, she would immediately fall in love and be lost forever. The only problem with this wonderful smile was that there was nobody to witness it. Ling Tian was greeted with stillness all around him, and the only sounds he could hear were the chirping of the cicadas coming from above the ground. They sounded so loud, as though they were right beside him. Ling Tian suddenly felt comfortably warm, an unspeakable sense of comfort, as though he was soaked in a perfectly calibrated hot spring. His spirit now seemed like a piece of exquisitely made jade, reflecting the goodness of the world, tangible and intangible. He flicked his sleeve, and enormous internal energy shot forth, blasting the boulder above him high up into the air. In that instant, the entire area was coated with a new layer of soil. Amid the flying debris, Ling Tian flashed out of his hiding spot, landing on the top of a tree. He immersed himself in the scorching sunlight as he cast his eyes toward the horizon, suddenly entertaining the thought of how it seemed like the world was underneath his feet. The monarch overlooks all below the heavens, commanding the rain and winds. That is me, Ling Tian. Ling Tian was unaware of how many days he had spent trapped in his hiding place, but he was definitely sure that it was no short break. The internal energy in his body had been replenished, and with a breakthrough in his cultivation as well as his mental state, he could estimate that it was not something that could have been done in just a day and night. The grumbling of his stomach made him even more sure of this fact. Based on his previous realm, his body wouldn't feel hunger even after 1 or 2 days, let alone make such a grumbling noise. It seemed like he had buried himself for at least 3 days. Was he trying to bury himself alive? Ling Tian laughed out. Even with the increase in his cultivation, he probably still wasn't a match for justice, but he should at least have some chance of withstanding him. The so-called martial way could only be considered having started when a person has reached the Xiantian stage. In the Xiantian stage, it can also be roughly divided into 4 categories, namely, cultivating essence into energy, smelting energy into spirit, refining the spirit back to void, and melding the void into the way itself. Right now, Ling Tian had successfully broken through the stage of cultivating essence into energy and had stepped into smelting energy into spirit. However, justice was most likely at the later stages of refining the spirit back to void, and he probably was even half a step into melding the void into the way. Thus, the distance between the two of them was still quite far, and while Ling Tian could clash head-on with justice now, he still wouldn't be able to defeat him. While he had currently improved his martial arts by a huge step, Ling Tian had always done things in a cautious way. Without an 80% chance of success, he wouldn't go and invite trouble. The most important thing now was for him to find something to eat. The other matters could wait, his stomach couldn't. Squinting his eyes, Ling Tian took his bearings before moving quickly towards the celestial gathering city of Western Han. Justice probably flew off to some random location already, right? He would probably be like a headless fly searching everywhere for traces of himself, and Ling Tian took joy in his misfortune. Justice, oh Justice, you've chased me for so long and made me this disheveled for the first time in my life. How can I not give you some punishment in return? I'll let you play around for a while longer. Ling Tian happily thought this as he sprinted towards the celestial gathering city. What he was unaware was the fact that Justice was also in that very same city, and had already been there for 3 days. Right now, this scary person had already once more recovered to his optimum level. In the time taken to pour a cup of tea, Ling Tian had arrived at the edge of the city. Casting his gaze around, it landed on a tavern, with the label, "One jar will get you drunk 3 days, the fragrance when a jar is opened spreads out 10 feet. Ling Tian chuckled at this. He didn't even dare claim that the hero's blood and Luna fragrance that he himself brewed could live up to such an expectation, but this little tavern actually dared to do so. He slowly approached the place. Right now, the sun shone down brightly, the time approaching afternoon. The tiny tavern was deserted, and the waiter was snoozing off at the counter, a trail of saliva hanging out of his mouth. Seeing how he was still smiling so widely in his dreams, Ling Tian assumed that he was having a happy dream. Even when Ling Tian approached him, there was no reaction, so Ling Tian lightly rapped the table before saying, "Oh, who dropped their silver?" "Silver? Where? Where?" "I dropped it. I dropped the silver." The moment he heard the magical word, the snoozing waiter immediately perked up in attention, and his eyes searched left and right, scanning the area around him. "Bring this young noble a few good dishes and some wine, and as for the silver, I'll definitely not be stingy." Ling Tian patted him on his shoulder as he smiled. "Sure, young noble, please hold on for a moment." The waiter scratched his head and laughed, running to the kitchens. In a moment, 4 dishes and a bowl of soup were served up, and just as the waiter turned to leave he recalled that the impeccably dressed young noble had not yet placed an order for wine. He turned back and began, "This young noble, would you like to?" The following words, however, got stuck in his throat as his eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. This seemingly rich and well-mannered young noble had one hand scooping up pieces of beef, and the other scooping up the soup, gorging himself like an animal. Looking at the dishes on the table, every dish had already been reduced by half, and that huge plate of beef was even close to being picked clean. The young noble's hands, mouth, and even his clothes were full of oil, and he was even ignoring whatever the waiter just said, enjoying himself in his own world. Chapter 377, A Lesson. The waiter couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Such unsightly table manners were such that even a starving beggar couldn't match up to them. The waiter had only noticed how this young noble's bearing was extraordinary but never noticed the fact that his clothes had not been changed for a couple of days and were filled with dust and mud. The waiter couldn't help but wonder whether or not the young noble's wallet was full. Just when the waiter was considering whether or not he should make Ling Tian pay his bill before continuing his meal, he heard the sound of galloping horses stopping outside the tavern. Following that, he noticed a large group of over 20 people walking in, and the old man leading the pack said, "Waiter, give us some good wine and dishes. Quickly, serve them up." The pronunciation of this old man was far too unclear, and the waiter didn't understand a single word, so he asked, "Sir, what did you say?" "Bah." A burly man behind the old man stepped forward and gave the waiter a slap before saying fiercely, "Good wine and dishes. Damn it, do you not understand human language? Quickly. If you dare delay any longer, this daddy here will smash your head apart." Being slapped off guard, the waiter's body spun a full round before landing on the floor with stars in his eyes. Holding on to his cheeks as he stood up, tears filled his eyes and resentment filled his heart. However, he had no choice but to acknowledge the orders of the burly man and quickly run into the kitchen. As he ran away, He cursed in his heart, "Is it really me not understanding human language? Your master's words are obviously not human language. You darn turtle BSD rogue who dares to slap me. I will curse you to lead a slave's life for all eternity." After the burly man had slapped the waiter, he turned around and said with a humble attitude and an apologetic smile, "First Elder, this wicked civilian does not know his worth and dares to offend the prestige of First Elder. He really deserves to die." That old man looked towards the sky and responded with a muffled and sat on a table opposite Ling Tian. The restaurant was originally cramped, and with the addition of over 20 men, it was crowded to the point that one would face difficulty turning around. When all of the tables were filled up, there were still 6 to 7 of them without a seat. One of the burly men then looked towards Ling Tian and began winking. The others immediately understood what he meant and all crowded over to Ling Tian's table. One arrogant individual then slammed Ling Tian's table and shouted, "You penniless beggar, are you not going to pay the bill and scram after you are finished with your meal? Are you still not giving up your seat after seeing this daddy come here? Are your eyes meant for you to pee?" As he said that, he felt his words extremely amusing and began to laugh. The others laughed alongside him and one of them said, "Why are you still wasting time with him? Just throw him out." At the same time, the old man leading the group sat on his own solemnly and completely ignored whatever was happening. It was obvious that this wasn't the first time the bunch of them did something like this. However, it was a pity that they had met with a tiger this time, a ferocious tiger who was capable of biting off their head. Ling Tian was completely calm as he lifted up his chopsticks and placed the last piece of beef into his mouth and drank 2 mouthfuls of soup. Then, he took out a clean handkerchief from his bosom and wiped his mouth. Only after that did he raise his head and look towards the 4 burly men standing in front of him with a smile that wasn't really a smile. As the arrogant man saw that Ling Tian was still able to keep his cool while ignoring him completely, he couldn't help but fly into a rage. In this world, it wasn't anything big to injure someone if they had the strength and numbers to do so. Thus, his hand flew towards Ling Jian as he scolded, "Continue acting." Before he could even finish his sentence, he suddenly let out a mournful wail as though he was a pig being slaughtered. As he looked again, his right hand was already pinned to the table by a chopstick. At the other end of the chopstick were 2 fair fingers lightly tapping on the ends of the chopstick. At the same time, the fingers swayed the chopstick slowly and rhythmically as the burly man let out a heart-wrenching groan with huge beads of sweat rolling down his face. Fresh blood began to spew out from his wound as it covered the whole table and dripped onto the floor drop by drop. The companions of that burly man never expected the teen in front of them to be so fierce, crippling the hand of the burly man before even saying a word. All of them were already used to being the local tyrants in the city and had almost never faced such a scenario before. In that moment, all of them were stunned silly without any reaction. The moans of the burly man echoed in the restaurant and he had almost run out of strength. With a few clanging sounds, the other burly men had finally reacted as they unsheathed their swords and pounced forward. A sword swung towards his neck, 1 pierced towards his chest and 3 more slashed down from above his head. All the blades let out sounds of metal slicing through the air and were all truly fatal strikes. Ling Tian's hand was still on the chopstick as he imbued a trace of his inner chi into it, smashing it into the bones of the burly man. At the same time, his other hand held on to the other chopstick and lifted it up indifferently. Ling Tian was still seated on the bench calmly with his satisfied expression looking as though he was still thinking about the delicacies he just had. The only thing that didn't fit into the picture was his hands, or perhaps the chopsticks in his hands. With a simple poke of his chopstick, it precisely landed on the incoming lightning-fast sword. With a soft ding, the tip of the chopstick landed right on the tip of the incoming sword and a strange wave of force was sent out. The burly man felt his arms go numb as he lost control of the sword in his hands and directed it towards the sword of his companion. His companion then felt his hand turn numb as well, and the trajectory of his sword was altered, blocking the 3 blades slashing towards Ling Tian's head. 5 of their attacks were blocked in an instant, but the method their opponent used was completely incredulous, as though it was a miracle. All of their faces were filled with bewilderment, and their hearts were thrown into confusion. They were completely puzzled about why their companion's sword would suddenly swing towards their own. While they were uncultured individuals, they knew that such a character was not one they could afford to offend. Thus, they quickly retreated towards the rear and looked towards the old man leading the group to await his decision. With a single poke of his chopstick, Ling Tian had nullified the attacks of 5 of them. At the same time, he didn't use much strength and didn't harm a single one of them. However, the accuracy of his actions and control of his strength left all of them dumbfounded. All of their jaws dropped as they gasped in shock. Just who was this young man in front of them? Even if he was filled with dust and mud all over, his elegant and noble demeanor couldn't be hidden. In that gentle smile of his, a biting chill could be felt from it as well. This made the first elder of the Ximen family gape with shock as fear crept into his heart and a name appeared in his head, Ling Tian. This name, which made all their Ximen family members gnash their teeth in hatred, drenched the first elder in cold sweat at this moment. The first elder was well aware of the profoundness and difficulty of Ling Tian's action. It was a feat impossible for him to accomplish. If that's the case, could it be that Ling Tian's martial arts were far above his own? Not to mention killing him, it would be impossible for them to even hold him back. Just when the first elder was pondering over how he should deal with the situation, Ling Tian lifted his head up and looked towards him with a cold pair of eyes and a smile which didn't seem like a smile. Exerting force with his palm, the right hand of the burly man pinned to the table gave out a few cracking sounds, and the burly man's face turned pale, letting out white foam from his mouth and collapsing from the pain. Brother team leader, this cracking sound really sounds like soybeans being fried. Doesn't it sound good? Ling Tian said with a chuckle, look at how you are so carefree and relaxed. It must definitely be the first time you have heard such a beautiful sound. Does it feel good? Do you want to hear it again? Are you young noble Ling Tian? Ximen said with a solemn expression and asked carefully. Despite his teeth still leaking out air, he actually didn't mispronounce a single word. If it was during an ordinary time, this old man would probably be overjoyed. But during such a moment, he only felt like crying. Oh? Good knowledge. Good eyesight. Ling Tian praised, you were actually able to see through this young noble's identity instantly. It seems like this young noble is truly famous. What is your position in the Ximen family? Ximen was completely stunned. How did he know that I was from the Ximen family? Seeing the look of doubt on Ximen's face, Ling Tian let out a sigh. Around the celestial gathering city, apart from your Ximen family, who else would dare to act in such an unbridled manner? Is it very difficult to guess? I don't really think there is anything difficult about that. Ximen felt his face turn red as he thought to himself with anger, even if you have top-notch martial arts and both our families are enemies, it still isn't right for you to scold me in the face. Don't you see the fact that this old man already has a huge beard? Don't you know how to respect your elders? In anger, his words began to be high-pitched. This old man is the first elder of the Ximen family, Ximen. I wonder, why is young noble Ling here in the celestial gathering city? An interesting expression appeared on Ling Tian's face as he mocked, I only knew that your Ximen family weren't capable of performing human acts in the past. Today, my views were broadened again, and it turns out that your Ximen family doesn't even know how to speak the human language. Who knows what you are talking about? Ling Tian, don't go too far. This old man isn't someone you can easily provoke. Ximen began shouting in anger. Chapter 378, Leave no one alive. You had better learn to speak the human language before talking to me. Ling Tian said with disdain. Ling Tian. UBSD Road. Ximen Xing's words were imbued with his inner qi and sounded like thunder on a clear day. The moment he roared, the 20-plus burly men in the restaurant felt themselves turn dizzy. Ximen Xing's plan was that since Ling Tian had appeared here, the martial order medallion owner must definitely be nearby. Thus, he bore with the humiliation he felt and projected his voice over a few miles. With Justice's hearing, it was impossible for Justice to miss his voice and would thus rush over shortly. As long as he could block Ling Tian for a short while, his plan would be accomplished. Killing intent flashed past Ling Tian's eyes. "You are calling for helpers, right?" Ximen Xing sneered. "Why? Do you have the guts to wait for my helpers to arrive?" Ling Tian snickered with disdain. "Ximen Xing, after being alive for so many years, you are becoming more and more like a dog. Do you think this young noble will give you such a chance?" His voice then turned chilly. "Besides, I really do not like your name, Ximen Xing. The Ximen family should be exterminated with nothing left behind." 1. Ling Jian's wrist suddenly twitched and the chopstick in his hands was split into 3 segments. Following which, 3 grunts could be heard and 3 burly men collapsed onto the floor with a broken segment of a chopstick in their throat. Everyone present could not even see Ling Tian's action. This included the first elder of the Ximen family, Ximen Xing. Ximen Xing felt his heart turn cold and shouted, "Attack together! Kill him!" The next moment, the 20-plus burly men pounced at Ling Tian from all directions. Ling Tian let out a cold smile and sent the table in front of him flying with a kick, smashing it into 3 people. Then, he lifted up the bench which he was sitting on and smashed it on the head of another man, crushing it like it was a watermelon. The gleaming blades slashed down together and Ling Tian's body swerved around like a fish in water and narrowly avoided the blades via a small opening. Using his left hand as a blade, 6 fountains of blood shot into the air as the 6 burly men collapsed while gasping for air. Ximen Xing let out a roar and pounced forward as well. How could he not know that he wasn't a match for Ling Tian at all? But if he were to cower in fear at such a moment, the morale of his troops would definitely be lost and it would be impossible for them to hold Ling Tian back. Thus, he clenched his teeth and charged forward with his life on the line. A cruel smile could then be seen on Ling Tian's lips as he jumped up and kicked the chin of a guard attempting to slash him. With his powerful inner qi being sent out, a crisp cracking sound could be heard and a decapitated head was sent flying towards Ximen Xing. Just when the head flew past Ximen Xing's head, a crisp kill was suddenly let out from the decapitated head's mouth. Ximen Xing was, after all, trying to force himself to keep his cool and was already fearful in his heart. Seeing such a scene in front of him, all of his hair could not help but stand up on end. At the same time, he also felt his heart pause for a moment. After being alive for such a long time, he had participated in many battles with at least hundreds of individuals dying under his hands. However, this was the first time in his life he had seen such a cruel method to kill someone. From the start of the fight, a mere 2 to 3 breaths had passed, and 14 out of the 20 burly men had fallen under Ling Tian's hands. The remaining 6 blades were still hoisted up in the air with the owner of the blades gasping with shock. A long while later, the sound of water dripping could be heard and everyone turned to the direction where it came from, only to see the pants of a burly man drenched wet with steam rising from his crotch. Ling Tian frowned as his body weaved past 6 burly men and his palm smashed towards Ximen Xing's head. Behind him, the 6 burly men let out an inaudible choking sound as they collapsed lifelessly on the floor. Ximen Xing's eyes turned red as well as he avoided Ling Tian's palm strike and took a step back swiftly. He then pounced forward again, and a bright flash shone onto Ling Jian's eyes. Ximen Xing had already drawn his sword and launched his strongest attack. Ling Tian sneered as he bent his knee slightly. The next instant, he launched forward and was already in the light screen formed by the dense sword light. Ximen's sword light rained down like a thunderstorm, but Ling Tian's body moved around nimbly with even the corner of his clothes completely unharmed. Instead, Ximen was the one forced into dire circumstances as Ling Tian sent out his lethal palm strikes. Ximen was startled as his sword danced around and he slowly retreated towards the door. Ximen, after meeting this young noble, do you expect to leave here alive? Ling Tian's mocking voice sounded as the strength of his palm strikes was increased. With a sudden wang, Ling Jian's finger tapped onto Ximen's sword and Ximen lost control of his sword, sending it flying towards the roof of the restaurant. After Ximen let out a neigh, he could not be bothered with anything else and sent out a few desperate palm strikes. Without bothering if his palm strikes had hit the target, he turned around and left. But right when he had left the restaurant, a white shadow flashed past his eyes and Ling Tian stood in front of him with a face full of killing intent. Ximen let out a roar of despair and attempted to turn around. But before he could turn around completely, Ling Tian's right foot kicked his crotch and he let out a miserable groan with blood spewing out from all the orifices on his face and his body sent flying. Ling Tian was already waiting for his arrival in midair and sent a foot towards his forehead, spinning his body like a top as he landed. When the both of them had touched the ground again, Ximen's head was already completely embedded into the ground. Ling Tian clasped his hand as his expression turned back to normal, walking back into the restaurant again. At this moment, the only survivor from the Ximen family was the burly man who had fainted from being pinned to the table previously. He had just regained his consciousness as he looked at Ling Tian with fear and despair in his eyes. Ling Tian's gaze swept past calmly as though he did not see anyone alive. Right when the burly man let out a heave of relief, he suddenly felt a foot stepping on his head. The only survivor could not survive. As though he was crushing a bad egg, a paw sound sounded from underneath Ling Tian's foot and Ling Tian walked out without turning back. At the same time, he threw out an ingot of silver casually and the silver landed accurately in the bosom of the waiter who was unconscious from shock. The force from the landing silver had woken up the unconscious waiter, and the hell-like scenario was presented before his very eyes. Before he even had a chance to look at what was in his bosom, he had fainted again from fear. A short few minutes after Ling Tian had left, a faint figure entered the restaurant and looked around for a short while before vanishing again. The waiter had just woken up at this moment and saw the disappearing figure. With his eyes opened up wide, he let out a scream, "Ghost! Demon!" He then fainted again. What a generation to be living in! An elegant young man killed as though he was dicing vegetables, and after that, I actually saw a ghost. I think it is best for me to return to the countryside and grow crops instead. I will never come to this ghost town again. This was the only thought the waiter had before he fainted. Ling Tian calmly strolled into the celestial gathering city. This was one of his targets. No matter what, he must get rid of the important personnel of the Ximen family to aid Ximensa in controlling the Ximen family. Who knows where that justice is right now? By the time he comes to the celestial gathering city, my task will already have been completed. Let him feel anxiousness since this young noble isn't anxious at all. Ling Tian thought to himself. However, he didn't know that Ximen's roar did indeed achieve the desired effect. Just when Ling Tian was killing in the restaurant outside the city, Justice had already heard Ximen's loud roar and rushed there at full speed. When Ling Tian had left the place, Justice had arrived shortly after. Right after Ling Jian entered the city, Justice had also entered shortly after. The both of them were only 1,000 feet apart. The deity of luck was indeed by Ling Tian's side, causing the Death Reaper to pass him by again. However, a mountain will never be able to hold two tigers, and it was impossible for Ling Tian and Justice not to meet each other in the celestial gathering city. The battle between them was already inevitable. At that time, just how would Ling Tian face Justice's unparalleled martial arts? In an inn of sky bearing, Shui Qianru and Shui Qianhuan were seated opposite each other. "Ruer, why did we lose contact with you completely for a short while? I was anxious to death." Shui Qianhuan looked at his sister with a doting gaze and realized that her complexion was pale with her eyes red and puffy as though she had just cried. "Are you injured? What happened? Is it serious? Who was the one who attacked you? Tell me, your brother will take revenge for you." The moment she saw her brother, Shui Qianhuan thought about the grievances she had suffered over the past few days and almost burst out into tears. However, she had a stubborn personality and forcefully withheld her tears, biting on her lips until a row of teeth mark could be seen. As Shui Qianhuan saw how her sister was acting, he was startled as a ball of anger rose up in his heart. Was she bullied in this period of time? The more Shui Qianhuan thought about it, the more he felt it was likely. Thinking about how his parents let his sister come out with him and such a thing actually happened to her, how was he supposed to answer to them? Thus, he could not help but bellow with anger, "Who did it? What do you mean by who did it?" Shui Qianru looked at her brother with a look of bewilderment. She was still thinking about how she should answer Shui Qianhuan's question and whether or not she should tell him about Ling Tian capturing her. However, Deer, who was by Shui Qianru's side, understood what Shui Qianhuan meant and said, "Rest assured, young noble, the little princess was not bullied." "Oh?" Shui Qianhuan nodded his head with a tinge of embarrassment. His tone was much gentler as he asked, "Then how did you get injured? How are your injuries? How about the rest? Where are the two Zhang elders?"
Thank you for your continued following. Please support us by subscribe to encourage our continued creation. And press the bell to notify new chapter from us. Thank you.